I just wanted to go back to the negative publicity that we can't ignore that there is about Prevent, I don't think. There was an Ofsted report this June that talks about many people just regarding it as just doing referrals and that being like the bare minimum. I wondered if you could comment on that, because it seems to me that simply doing referrals is possibly the least helpful thing you could do. Actually, the more positive, more involving things, involving discussions in classrooms and in universities are the things that we should be trying to make sure do happen, and how the negative publicity, the fact that people maybe see it as a dampener on free expression, how that can be worked into your programmes. It seems to me only the priority boroughs may be able to do anything about that, because they don't have the resources to do anything other than refer in the non-priority boroughs. Just can you possibly talk about how that aspect of things?
So I think you picked the difference between priority and non-priority boroughs. So priority boroughs are generally funded to do that more detailed work. So it's not just about teachers referring people that they think exhibit behaviours, but it's then, even before that happens, it's working with the classes at quite a young age through on packages to sort of deliver those messages in a classroom setting. So we can afford to do that, and I think Newham can afford to do that, but that's where Bexley can't afford to do that.
Do I agree with that?
We'd make it clear as well in the training sessions that with all schools that there's an expectation to be proactive as well as reactive, and I would say most of our schools do some proactive work around this area, whether it's themselves or some external parties that do some proactive work. But how we can scale that across London and across the country is a challenge that needs to be met.
Well, I think some of that goes back to the trust and the relationship that you have locally with those organisations, which won't just be around the Prevent agenda, it will be around a whole host of things. And actually, I don't think you can underestimate the value of some of those relationships and how that influences and supports a more positive narrative.
Can I ask how, maybe you, Sarah, how useful the referral process is as part of that package of measures? Does it actually contribute?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think we've already touched on, actually, this isn't one thing in isolation, and the referrals process is part of this wider package, and that in isolation its effectiveness is more around addressing some of that. And I think that goes back to the point I made around that level of engagement and how that interactions with the police primarily. So I think all of that is really sort of feedback we've given throughout today, which is something that needs to be reflected upon.
There was one other thing you mentioned, sorry to just ask for clarification. You talked about the vulnerability framework and how it may need to change. Does that relate to the changing nature of attacks, the changing from more organised things to maybe lone wolves, people who are more vulnerable? A safeguarding approach might be more appropriate to them because they're vulnerable in other ways. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly all of those things, really. And I think some of that is quite focused on around specific ideology as well. And so I just think all of those points that you've made and more around, we just need to recognise that should be a dynamic process, actually, is what I would suggest. It should be a dynamic process based on current vulnerabilities and risks. And at the moment, I think it's a bit more... it's not as dynamic as it should be.
Is the framework a set of signs that you look for? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's almost a questionnaire, isn't it? Basically, it's a question, very specific questions. That then the framework provides then a level of risk based on individuals' answers to those questions, if those individuals are happy to engage and answer those questions in the first place.